Welcome to Cup Chat with Texas A&M AgriLife Extension Service. Today, join our Birding with Extension team members along with guest Bob Wucher as they discuss bird nutrition.
Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to Cup Chat with Birding with Texas A&M AgriLife Extension Service. So I am so excited today and to introduce. I'll let Liz do our introduction. But this topic is something that we've kind of thrown around for a long time, and I was lucky enough to find a speaker that kind of meshes the idea of what we call in the livestock world supplemental feeding. That means providing an additional resource for our livestock other than native rangeland and the nutritional needs of why we supplemental feed our livestock. So Liz, I'll let you do our introductions.
So this morning, we have Bob, it's Wucher, right?
Bob Wucher, yes.
Wucher. So we have Bob with us this morning, and he works for Purina Mills, and so he is basically like an avian nutritionist. So he covers poultry and wild birds. So we feel like he was the perfect guest to have on to talk about bird nutrition. You know, obviously a lot of us enjoy feeding our birds, and a lot of birds eat seeds. It's the most common thing that we feed our birds. So we figured we'd have Bob on to hopefully answer some questions that people may have about feeding birds, how to maybe do it a little bit better, because we're always looking to improve our bird skills. So Bob, I guess we'll start off with some really, really simple questions this morning. So what led you into like bird nutrition specifically? Because I mean, you could have worked on anything. So why birds?
Well, as a kid, I volunteered for the National Audubon Society bird banding project in Virginia. And so I would go out and catch birds and band them. And that started my interest in wild birds and their migratory patterns and that type of thing. When I got into school with my animal science degree, because I was a bird guy, while I ended up doing all the animals, my focus was on poultry and broilers in particular. And so I got to start learning about that side of the industry from a commercial side. But at the end of the day, they're all birds. And so I kind of have a love for the feathered friends, as they say. And I've just gone from there. I've worked for Purina for about 35 years, and I help put together their wild bird line. And I do currently work with some commercial poultry operations.
Oh, Emily, you got something? Oh, you're still muted.
It's challenging. I'm going to try to leave. So if y'all can't tell, I'm on the road this morning. So I'll try to leave myself unmuted so I don't have any challenges muting and unmuting. But if the road noise is too bad, let me know. So Bob, so you are a birder in the sense of birders, and you enjoy birds, but you also enjoy working with our poultry. Tell us a little bit, maybe you hinted on that they're all birds and they're all the same. Can you kind of maybe elaborate on that as to why they're the same and how nutritionally we think about feeding birds, whether that's poultry that we consume or our wild birds? Kind of give us the basics.
So when I say all birds are the same, from a genetic standpoint, you have different birds, but physically, the internal workings of these birds are set up relatively similar. Some birds will have a bigger gizzard like a chicken, where you wonder, why are they picking up rocks? Well, because they use rocks as a grind and mortar type thing in their gizzard. So when they eat seed, they can turn it into flour. Other birds, they don't have a big gizzard. They have a smaller gizzard, or they'll have a storage crop, wild birds in particular. And they don't eat so many rocks, but they have a stronger ability to break down seeds in and of itself. So, and then when you look at what I call the light cycle of a bird, there will be times when those birds will go through molt. And it's generally relative to the amount of light that they're receiving. And I get calls all the time. My birds are losing all their feathers. My chickens are losing all their feathers. Well, it's September and it's time for them to go into molt because our light has dropped down below 16 hours of average light a day. So we see egg production drop. And generally that's due to light and protein values dropping in the natural environment. And that's why I tell people, when you see grackles on your car in October and they have no tail feathers and everything else, they're going through molt just like a regular chicken would. And it's just due to lack of light and change in protein and energy that's available to those birds. So.
Oh, we may have lost Emily for a second. She'll be
Yeah.
back.
And especially,
Oh, go ahead. You're just kind of breaking up a little bit.
I think we lost her.
Oh, wait, your video's back. Go ahead.
oh, I was saying, when you talk about that nutritional changes, and then the lack of protein, how do we compensate for that? Are we supposed to compensate for that?
So
Go ahead.
So we generally, like in the chicken industry, I'll just tell people, hey, in late August, early September, just add a light bulb into your coop, keep them with 16 hours of light. And if you're feeding a good feed with enough protein in it, you won't miss a day with egg laying because they won't go through molt because you've made them have their 16 hours of light. In the wild, when birds go through molt, their protein needs increase because what they're after is, I need to regrow feathers, and feathers are made up of protein. And so a lot of people will start feeding high protein seeds out in their feeders. Generally, I do it year round, but most people will start, oh, it's starting to get chilly out, I'm going to put a feeder out. Well, in that same time frame, those birds are going through their roughest molt period anyway. So if you're putting out feed that has higher protein, they're going to flock to it pretty quickly because that's one of the things they need. In the wintertime, we tend to lose all of our insects as they go into hibernation, and the birds will then start looking for feed that are higher in protein, higher in fat in the wintertime. But there's certain times a year where that's what they're going to be looking for, is the higher protein, higher fat. And other times they're just using it to feed their babies. And I know a lot of folks are worried about, well, if I feed the birds year round, are they not going to migrate? I said, yeah, they will still migrate. All you're doing is giving them, I call it, you're the fast food place on their way down south. So it works really well, and the birds in your neighborhood tend to know which houses have feeders, that your year-round birds. And so when you're out of feed, don't worry about it. You were out for 2 weeks or a month, there's always another fast food restaurant in the neighborhood. 80% of all the houses out there will feed birds at one point in time during a year. So everybody seems to like feeding the wild birds.
And see, I mean, I think Emily and I can both attest, like we knew that a lot of people fed birds. I didn't think that like up to 80% of people would feed birds. So it definitely, I know. So it definitely makes me feel better whenever, I'm away for a little bit and then my feeders are dry for a little bit, that they're not going to starve. It'll be okay. Plus they have their wild food that they can go after, a little bit harder to go after, but that is always still there, always an option. So Bob, you had touched on a little bit of that, during molting, during the winter, birds are nutritionally under a little bit more stress. Are there any other times of year that would be nutritionally stressful for birds, that people, if they didn't want to feed all year round, maybe they could focus, during these certain times of year feeding?
Well, generally it's going to be I call it from Thanksgiving to Easter. That's going to be the highest stress time. And then the other time, depending on where you live, like here in Texas, if we're in a drought, we start to lose all of our insects because there's just not enough moisture in the air for them to breed and that type of thing. So the insect population starts to drop. And so if you're in a drought in Texas or anywhere, that's a good time to throw a feeder out there. And, for me, because where I'm at in Texas, we go through a drought every 4 to 5 years, and they can last for a couple of years. And so these birds will get stressed, and you offering them something to continue to live what I call a thriving bird life in your backyard or in your neighborhood is a great benefit to them. It is. And so it's kind of fun. You get to keep them around.
Well, and if you think about that, Bob, and correct me if I'm wrong, yes, our resident birds, when we're going through a drought, definitely have some suffering and challenges, just like all of our other native wildlife. But think about I'm just thinking, if I'm a migrating bird, right?
Right.
And I'm flying, and I'm just going to use, Del Rio, kind of that area where we host Birding the Border at, that they're in an extreme drought. I have just left the rainforest in Mexico where there is lots to eat, and it's been so fun down there, and I've hung out with all my bird friends, and now I'm migrating and I'm in a desert,
Yep.
And then I have to keep going thousands of miles to get to my next happy place where there's rain and food. And so thinking about that during that migration period of how important it is for our resident birds in a drought, but also our migrating birds who are coming from thriving ecosystems to a droughtful area here in Texas, kind of giving them that extra boost and saying, oh, here's a fast food McDonald's when you're, between Junction and El Paso and there's nothing else there.
Well, and that's exactly the fact, is that and the birds will remember, they will learn on their migratory route where to go. It's just like ducks and geese. They have certain areas that they will drop into the wetlands as they're migrating because they know this is a easy access to food. Once these birds know the pattern, they will continue to use that same route. And it's what I enjoy about migratory birds, because if you put a feeder out, you never know what you're going to get when you're in the middle of the flyway. I've had rose-breasted grosbeaks drop into my feeder, and they're really not anywhere close to native around North Texas. And so those are the type of things and it's why I feed, is that I like to see the buntings and the painted buntings come in. And even if they're only there for a week, I know that I help them out on their journey to their next location.
Right. Okay. So this is the question I've been dying to ask and get some answers on. So with livestock, and you understand I have an ag background, so it's easier for me to relate it to livestock. We feed different feeds with different nutritional values and different worths. Is all bird seed created equal, or should I be tailoring my bird seed to my birds? Share with us what should we feed and why does it matter?
So there's a lot of bird seed on the market, right? What you generally will find is that there are blends out there that I call just economy blends. Think of all stock for livestock, right? Yeah, it's good for everything, but
everything.
But because it has nothing in it, it's good for nothing because it's all stock. It has, so it's got no copper in it, so I can feed it to sheep and goats, but it doesn't do good for horses. Same thing with bird seed. You've got basic blends out there that are Milo, 40%, 50% Milo, some black oil sunflower, and some cracked corn. And maybe a little bit of white millet added to it. Those blends are cheaper. The challenge with them is they're lower in protein, and they generally are, you'll see the birds hit the feeder and you're wondering, why is that bird going back and forth and spraying feed all over the place and is growing on the ground underneath? Because there's certain seeds that they're looking for that from an energy and protein standpoint are not in your feed, right? And so the other thing people don't realize is that Milo for years has been bred now with high tannic acid levels, and birds can only eat a little bit of that and then they're done. It's designed to prevent the red-winged blackbirds from going into the Milo fields and just demolishing them. They can eat a little bit and then it kind of gives them acid indigestion kind of thing. But the side point on that is that people will say, I don't feed wild birds because I get all this growth under the feeder. Well, that's what you're getting, is the stuff that they're spraying out that they don't want, right? So when you start to look at, well, what do they want? What do they need? The big three that I call it is going to be black oil sunflower, white millet, safflower. That combination will do the best at attracting birds and not have a lot grow underneath it. Some people say I have a lot of sparrows. Well, sparrows like the white millet. They like the smaller seeds. White millet is 22% protein. So it does great for smaller birds because they're so small, they like the higher protein. Their bodies are like, think of an Arab horse. They have a racy metabolism, right? The black oil is 16% protein, but it's 44% fat. So in the wintertime, if you put black oil out, you'll have every blue jay, cardinal, everything that you can think of that has a seed cracker beak will flock to your feeder. And so as you start to look at the different seeds, this is why companies will put out, hey, I want sunflower hearts, I want millet, and I might throw some peanuts in there, and I'm not putting any Milo in the product, or I won't put any corn in the product because they're low in protein and low in energy. And so that those products cost a lot more, which is okay. It's going to cost more, but I don't have anything growing under the feeder. I might get the occasional sunflower plant that somebody didn't get a hold of, but they generally clean up better, and the birds, they attract a wider variety of birds. The one thing I will say is that one of the bird species that seems like is loved around the country, other than the cardinal, which is the #1 bird species, is a goldfinch. And goldfinch have a very particular type of diet. In the wild, they eat thistle.
I have plenty of those at my house. Can they start up by my house and eat all the thistles?
You have to wait till so here's the deal. You have to wait till the thistle actually blooms and then dies, and they go eat the seed. I
don't want the thistle to bloom and spread its seeds. I need them to get the seeds before they spread. So okay.
Exactly.
But just so every goldfinch knows, I have plenty of thistles that I did not get taken care of this year.
So the goldfinch will eat black oil sunflower, but their #1 love is thistle, and because it's their natural seed that they'll eat. And people will put goldfinch feeders out with thistle, and the feeder you have to use is a very tiny whole thistle feeder. And because the thistle looks almost like a rye seed, it's very thin, very small, and they can see it and smell it. It's interesting the way a goldfinch works, because if it's an old seed, they won't eat thistle if it's a year old. So the birders that know, when the goldfinches leave, they take their thistle and they put it in the freezer, and it stores for the next year. So
good to know. Everybody put your thistle seeds in the freezer.
And if you're trying to get goldfinches for the first time, you either buy the yellow feeder or you put a yellow ribbon on top of your feeder, because goldfinches flying at 50 feet up in the air as they're migrating, they will see yellow and come down to your feeder just because they saw the yellow.
I always kind of wondered that, because it's like most of the finch feeders that I see are
yellow.
Are yellow.
Yep.
And I just kind of
why.
never, it's like hummingbirds in red,
Yep.
finches in yellow. Okay.
And that's why. Yep.
Interesting. Okay.
So
Okay, so you kind of touched on this a little bit already. But okay, so seeds, you've mentioned that they provide fat. They also provide protein.
correct.
Do they provide any sort of vitamins or any other nutritional things
Right.
for birds?
Yeah, all the seeds that you see, just like in feed, will have a certain amount of vitamins and minerals to it. Some will have more, some will have less. For the birds in general, they're not getting seed for vitamins and minerals. That's just the side benefit. They're getting it for the big three. I need it for protein, fat, and fiber. And so some of your arboreal, I've had scarlet summer tanagers come to my feeder, and the only thing they were eating was peanuts. But a summer tanager is an insectivore. It just eats insects. And that kind of shocked me. So I started doing a little research on it. Well, insects are pretty much fat and protein.
Right.
And so if you're looking at grubs and things like that, those are all fat and protein, and that's what they're getting out of peanuts when they can't get enough up in the canopy. So this is why we see peanut feeders out there. There's a lot of woodpeckers and blue jays, and the larger birds will grab those peanuts and take off and go crack them in somebody else's yard, because that's usually they're in my backyard. But it's when you see a seed blend with peanuts in it, understand that they're in there for a reason, for that high fat, and they've got a pretty good amount of protein in there also. And the other thing that we really didn't talk about is woodpeckers. So I like woodpeckers. Some people don't like them because they might get in the house or on the roof or whatever. But if you put a suet feeder out, they will come, and I've had them bring their babies and teach their babies how to eat suet off my feeder. And there's a lot of different suets out there. The one that's gotten more popular is one that has chili powder added to it to keep the squirrels from eating it. The squirrels tend to like suet too, because suet's got usually black oil sunflowers in it, and they'll put some cracked corn in there or peanut butter or something that's going to be a high energy type ration. And the higher the energy it is, the better it is for woodpeckers. Woodpeckers' sole diet is going to be beetle grubs that they're digging out of trees. And so unless you're a flicker woodpecker, then you're eating ants too. But for the most part, those guys need that high protein, high fat diet at the high. And I've had them come in and eat the peanuts, and they'll take some black oil sunflower every now and then, and they'll take some safflower every now and then. But their big love is going to be suet and peanuts.
Gotcha. And so on that suet, we talk a lot about suet, definitely in the winter, for that extra energy and calories.
Right.
Why is suet? Is there a replace? To me, suet has the added responsibility of going bad, and sometimes in Texas we still get a little hot temperatures in our summer or in our winter, so we can be warm in winter here. Is there a replacement for that suet in terms of that energy component that we maybe could see in other seeds or feeds?
Yeah, that's going to be your black oil sunflower and your peanuts. Okay. Those have the highest fat content, around 40%, right? So that's going to be your replacement. And generally, I don't feed suet year round. I only feed it in the wintertime. And during the summertime when the birds are coming, they will end up, like right now is my suet is gone. They just finished it up, and I won't put any more out until probably Thanksgiving time.
Gotcha.
Because just
do you
what you
make
said,
your own homemade suet, or do you
I do both.
purchase pre-made?
So I do both. So I'll use some chunky peanut butter and put it in a suet blend, and then I'll mix in my black oil sunflower, and I will mix in some millet in there, and I'll put it in. When you buy your suet in the little plastic packages, keep the plastic mold, and then just do it, and then stick it in, after you're done with it, stick it in the freezer, and you freeze it into that mold. And I keep all my suet in the freezer.
So I've got a question. What about bark butter? Same thing as suet, just a different consistency?
Correct. Same thing as suet, just a different consistency.
Yeah. So, wow, I'm just, okay, so let's go back to the protein and energy requirements. On an average day, what type of energy, what type of protein levels should we be striving to feed on a daily basis? So what percent protein should our feeds be?
So I'm gonna put it at, it's no less than 16%.
Okay.
Okay. The bird's requirement at a minimum is 16%. And so when you start to look at what feeds have 16% or better protein, you're looking at thistle, black oil sunflower, millet, and safflower. Okay. The ones that have less, milo, 8%, corn, 10%. So while doves can eat some of that stuff, what you'll see, a dove will eat millet over corn or milo every day, and they'll just eat black oil sunflowers, just gobble them up. So I've got white-winged doves and mourning doves in my backyard, and I do not feed any millet-based or milo-based products.
Gotcha.
So all I get is sunflower hearts and black oil sunflower and millet.
So, gotcha. So really, if you stick with those three, you're pretty safe.
Yes. And if you have a squirrel problem, this is where the safflower plays a big role. Squirrels don't like safflower, but all the birds that like black oil will eat safflower. So some people say, well, I'm just going to put safflower in the feeder, and the squirrels don't mess with the feeder. And now they've made so many feeders that are squirrel proof, it really doesn't matter. You can just put them on there, and the squirrel gets on there, it shuts the feeder down, so they can't. So
true.
So you give it some time, the squirrels will figure it out, because they have nothing better to do than to figure out how to de-squirrel proof your squirrel proof.
So yeah,
feeder.
I put baffles under all my, and I use the shepherd's hooks, and then I put a baffle underneath it, and that generally helps as long as you're far enough away from a tree that the squirrel doesn't do the flying leap over to the feeder thing. So
that is always a trick. Okay, so we're getting close to our time. So I guess my last question for you is, so when people are going to purchase their seeds, they're going to purchase safflower, black oil, thistle, right, what have you, is there anything that people should, I hate to say avoid, but I guess you could say like avoid when purchasing those seeds, like trying to find maybe higher quality, right, or what have you?
So I think the first thing for a new person is to go into a store and look for a cardinal blend, because all the stores carry a cardinal blend, and that will have the big three in there. It'll be safflower, it'll be black oil, and it may be millet, but it's probably going to be some peanuts in there. So, but once you see what that looks like, then you can start looking at other bags of feed that have that combination, and it might have more millet. Then when you go look at the $10 bag of birdseed, and it looks totally different. It looks like it's got corn. It looks like chicken scratch grains. It's got corn, it's got milo, it's got a little white millet in it, and it's got a little black oil. It will be the cheapest, but it's also going to have the most waste. And so when you're spending money, I'd rather not have it be spilled on the ground and growing. That's not what I bought it for, right? I want it to be fed to the birds. So you can actually start to look, and I always start with the cardinal blends first, because every store has a cardinal blend. It's the number one fed bird in the country. So look at what's in that bag, and then look at the stuff around it if you want to try and do something a little different.
Gotcha. Okay, I have one last question because it just popped on my mind. Really quick, touch on jelly feeders and oranges and putting those out for some of our species, some of our Orioles.
So the jelly feeders and the oranges are really, really popular where you have Orioles and a lot of buntings, and even the tanagers will go down to those orange and jelly feeders. The biggest challenge is bees and ants, because there's a lot of sugar in the jelly feeder side of it. But remember, the birds that and the orange is kind of like you're doing it like with the goldfinches. They're attracted to the orange, right?
Okay.
And you want to replace those. You don't want those to sit out there longer than a couple of days, because they will spoil, and especially if it's hot out, and the jelly will melt when it's really hot out, and kind of get liquidy on you, which is then all of a sudden I've got bees and ants, and there is ways you can build. They have the feeders with the water moats around it to prevent the ants from getting in there. It adds a variety to your feeding station. Where I live, we don't have Orioles. They'll be here for a day or two, and then they're moving up to Colorado to have fun up there in the mountains. But down south, we do have some Orioles that in that Rio Grande Valley area, and they will hang out for quite a long time.
Nutritionally, any better than providing seeds or nutrition, or they're more attractants than versus a nutritional substance?
Correct. This is just an attractant. It's from a nutritional standpoint, they're coming in there to get more of a treat versus a meal, right? And you're actually using it. I want them in my backyard. I want to see them. You're using it to attract them, to see them. Versus the other, it's a different type of feeding, right? The other is an actual meal feeding that I'm trying to supplement, versus attracting to see them. There's not a whole lot in an orange that they can get from a protein standpoint. They're just there because they like the taste of it, and they get some vitamin C and that type of thing. And same thing with jellies. Jellies are mostly sugar, and so hummingbird feeders. Hummingbird feeders. Hummingbirds are all about nectar, and all we're doing is creating a fake nectar in there. And Orioles, they're insect eaters, but they also will get into flowers and get nectar too. So that's where they get the sweet from.
So it's just the ice cream shop next to the fast food restaurant.
Yes.
That's the way to think about it. Yeah. It's the after dinner mint.
Chocolate. After dinner chocolate. Like that they have those at Olive Garden. Those are the best. So, well, I know we are coming up on 8:00. Everybody, thank you so much for joining us. Bob, Liz, any final thoughts before we wrap up on this Wednesday?
Nope. I think this was great. We greatly appreciate you coming on this morning, Bob, to talk to us about nutrition. And I think, I don't know, Emily and I definitely learned some things about storing our thistle, about goldfinches in yellow. So hopefully all of our viewers are going to learn some tips and tricks for this upcoming summer of feeding our birds. So
I think it's just neat. It's just nice to know the actual nutritional requirements and what we're providing. We know what we're not supposed to buy. Trash feed was what we call it. but why? And hearing all of the scientific research and knowledge that you've had and experience of feeding commercial birds and our wild birds really helps us put the why behind all of that. So I'm super grateful that you were able to come on and join us today, Bob.
Thank you very much.
Absolutely. Well, y'all have a great Wednesday, and I believe next week. Are you coming on next week? No. Oh, the 29th. My chauffeur is coming on the 29th, and we're going to talk about exploring AgriLife. If you didn't know, AgriLife has a whole lot of programs, and so that's kind of a unique thing. And so the 29th, we're going to be talking about the different programs Texas A&M AgriLife Extension Service offers, not just about birds. I guess Bob left us, so that's sad, but we really appreciate Bob this morning. But Liz, everybody, y'all have a great morning and a happy Wednesday.
Bye.